What's going on, people of the internet? Hyperchaotic here with a K, double R, and welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time visiting my channel. In today's video is a topic that I've been sitting on for quite a while that I was inspired to make back when I saw a War Thunder rant video about the Chinese tech tree and how it's just a bunch of American and Soviet vehicles with different stats. And what's really funny about this is right before I saw that video, I literally watched a video on the military history of China during World War II and their struggles to fight the Japanese invasion due to many various reasons that I will get into today. Why would I get into that given our topic at hand? Because these historical factors are a reason for why the Chinese tech tree, in not only War Thunder, but World of Tanks as well, is filled with vehicles from the American, Soviet, and even Japanese tech trees. Now, why am I including World of Tanks into this if this is a video inspired by a War Thunder video? Well, a while ago when I started playing World of Tank Blitz, I noticed a similar situation with the Chinese tech tree because I decided to purposely go with the Chinese and Japanese tech tree. You actually have to choose two beginning tech trees you want to go with, and I chose the Japanese and Chinese tech trees because in any video game, or really media for that matter of fact, I barely ever see any Japanese or Chinese military vehicles. Well, at least for the Japanese side, I barely see any other than your typical Hago Type 97 light tanks, or I forget some of the name of the planes. I know a lot of their planes were Mitsubishi planes. I just don't remember exactly some of the name of some of the planes, the most infamously known ones, the most popular ones in media. So to play any game that features those vehicles, especially the ones that are not as popular, I'm more than ready to give them a try. And when I took a look into the Chinese tech tree and the Japanese tech tree, I started to notice how some of the tanks were very similar in name and just general cosmetic. And it was like, oh wait, it's literally the same fucking tank, just with a different shade of green and a different name. And of course, different stats. Now, really quickly before I get right into it, I could already hear some people in the comment section typing away, "Oh look, a War Thunder player that knows his history. Get in line, buddy. You and every other War Thunder player." Slow down. When the fuck did I say I was a War Thunder player?
Huh?
I know some people are going to be confused when I say that. Look, have I played War Thunder before? Absolutely. Am I making a video based on a game I have tried before? Absolutely. That is what I am doing today. Well, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. I really don't have that much game time in War Thunder. In fact, I have way more playtime in World of Tank Blitz than I do War Thunder. Which is to say, the full amount of time that I played in World of Tank Blitz is just a month. Just a month. And for World of Tanks, it's probably like a quarter of that. Maybe above a quarter. But needless to say, I have not played enough World of Tanks to truly consider myself... I'm sorry. I have not played enough War Thunder to consider myself a War Thunder player. Have I played enough to kind of get a somewhat of an understanding of the game? Yes. Have I played enough to decide whether or not I'm interested and want to continue to play the game? Yes. And in case you're wondering, yes, I do want to continue to play it. I will continue to play it for a little bit longer. I doubt I'm going to grind through this fucking game, but I'm definitely going to play it for a while. I do find it fascinating. But for the most part, I'm not a War Thunder player. I'm not really a War Thunder casual. I'm just a guy that likes games that feature military vehicle combat or games specifically designated to military vehicle combat. Plus, I'm also a guy who likes history. And just in general, I don't just mean history around military combat or military vehicles or general military history. A lot of the history I'm interested in does include military history, not just World War II, even like ancient times, but I'm interested in history in general. So when you combine two of these things together, a military vehicle combat game and history, specifically being historically accurate, how could I not be interested in it? And on top of that, okay, yeah, a lot of War Thunder players, which I just recently found out from a rant like that on one of my shorts, explaining the historical reasons why some of the tanks in War Thunder suck in tank on tank combat, mainly because they're not designed for that purpose, such as the Japanese light tanks. So, okay, yeah, a lot of players of War Thunder just happen to be guys who are into history and are also interested in a game that is specifically designed to be a historically accurate and, if you play the realism mode, realistic in a sense of physics game with historically accurate, or as accurate as they could possibly be, featured all the way from the Second Great War and wars up until now. What a fucking surprise that a lot of them would be into history. It's almost as if this very game was designed for that demographic in mind. Yeah, but point being, I'm not really a War Thunder player. I'm just a guy who likes history and games with military vehicle combat. Alright? Now let's get into our topic at hand. So, why does the Chinese tech trees in both of these games include a lot of vehicles from the American, Soviet, and even Japanese tech trees, but with different stats? Well, simply put, the Chinese military, in real life, when they had access to these weapons, these vehicles, had versions of them that were damn near carbon copies, but with different stats. What do I mean by that? Well, before we go into detail on that little part, we gotta take a quick deep dive into the Chinese Civil War and the invasion of China from Japan. By the way, a quick little note that I just want you to keep in mind is that the Chinese Civil War was still going on during the invasion of China from Japan. They just basically put a halt on it when they chose to come together to fight them off. And then once they were gone, they continued it afterwards. That's just something that I want you to keep in mind as I move forward with this elaboration. Now, during both of these events, China did not have a surplus of weapons for the military. In fact, they didn't really have a full together military or an in contact whole military, because the nation in of itself was not together as one whole nation. They were fighting against each other themselves right after the most recent dynasty had collapsed. But not only were there two factions, the nationalists and the communists, fighting over control of China, but there were many different regions that were controlled by Chinese warlords. China was not one whole country. It was broken up into different little factions, all fighting against each other, trying to take power for themselves. Because of this, the nation didn't really have a whole military, and it didn't really have a manufacturing hub for this military. In fact, they really struggled to get any weapons, let alone make their own. And if you look into the history of any weapons made by the Chinese from the 1900s all the way up into the early 2000s, anything that they did make by themselves, that they made their own, a lot of it was copied from other weapons, other designs from other nations, such as a lot of German guns right after the First Great War, during the beginning of their Civil War. And these weapons that they would obtain would either be purchased from whatever resources they could gather up, or military support from another nation, choosing one side or the other. But even then, to a degree, it wasn't enough. And because of this, and the fact that they didn't have a lot of manufacturing hubs, they didn't have a lot of factories to produce their own, well, they had to get creative. So what they would do is they would hire some gunsmiths, and hire them to make some guns in mass. And what they would do is they would take the weapons they already had, reverse engineer them, and try to make carbon copies, or as carbon of a copy as they could, to the original to make more of their own. But due to the fact that both factions were using similar weapons, hiring their own gunsmiths to make their own version of it that had to be reverse engineered and copied, a lot of which did not work together with each other. You had a lot of these low quality, not up to standard weapons that looked very similar to each other, but were not exactly the same in the sense of quality, in the sense of individual parts. Like if you wanted to take the part from one rifle and put it into another one, well, good luck with that. It was made from a different guy. Now, if they actually had a manufacturing hub to produce these weapons, any factories to produce these weapons, it's possible some of these nations that provided military aid may have allowed them permission to produce some of their weapons in their nation. They would have allowed them the license to their patents to produce them and would have given them the original blueprints, maybe the original materials. But they didn't. So they had to make their own with the resources they had by trying to copy it the best way they could through an art we all know as bootlegging. Yes, the Chinese art of bootlegging was used a lot to create weapons and other military equipment during the Chinese Civil War and fighting off the invasion of Japan.
The Type 36. During World War II, the United States Lend-Lease program led to the American-manufactured weapons being widely used in numerous conflicts all across the globe. For example, American guns were used by Allied troops as well as by guerrillas in the Balkans, as well as by troops of the Kuomintang in China. When the war ended and the Lend-Lease program ceased, the import of these firearms to the country was reduced significantly. However, the nationalist Chinese forces were still in need of weapons because of the domestic hostilities between the nationalists and the communists. After the communists had eventually gained the upper hand by utilizing large amounts of weapons abandoned by the Japanese after the Second World War, the nationalists tried to match their strength by increasing their own arms production. For this purpose, the nationalist-controlled Shenyang Arsenal near Mukden began production of grease gun copies. Although the Type 36 used the same 45 ACP ammunition and differed from the M3A1 only by a different barrel nut and the lack of an oil container inside the pistol grip, most parts were not interchangeable. Despite being a very close copy of the grease gun platform, the Type 36 was a comparably low-quality weapon. Although a seemingly simple weapon, the grease gun required a complicated manufacturing process involving large stamping machines, something the Chinese did not have at the time. Still, the fact that the Shenyang Arms Company lacked the proper machinery did not stop the nationalists from producing around 10,000 copies of the Type 36. The Norinco CQ-311. The Chinese did not stop copying American weapons with the Type 36 grease gun clone. In fact, the act of copying weapons has continued in the country right up until the present day. One of the most blatant examples of a Chinese copy is the CQ-311. The CQ-311, or the CQ-M311, was introduced in the early 1980s and is a direct clone of Colt's AR-15 platform, more specifically the M16 series of rifles. Although a direct copy of the American M16, the CQ-311 has several minor differences, the most recognizable being the curved hand grip. CQ-311 also has a different forestock and foresight. What can't be seen, though, is the difference in the quality of the materials used. While Colt uses T70-74 aluminum in the manufacturing process, Norinco uses T60-60 aluminum, which uses metal injection molding rather than the arguably superior forging technique the American company uses.
So, you literally had new versions or lower quality versions, similar versions of American, Soviet, and Japanese armored vehicles weapons, but with different stats in real life. Because no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get them up to the same stats and mass produce them quickly. Because that's the thing about producing a surplus of weapons for a military. They go for the lowest bidders. And the reason why they go for the lowest bidders is because they need to go for the guys who can mass produce weapons for the lowest cost so they can get them to as many soldiers as soon as possible. Especially when they're straight up going to war or are in all-out war. But for a nation that didn't really have a manufacturing hub, that was very, very difficult to do. So, again, they remade anything they could get their hands on and reproduce their own versions. Sure, you may look at it and think, well, that's just an American thing, that's just a Soviet thing, that's just a Japanese thing. On the outside, it looks like it, but on the inside, it's not one-to-one. Nonetheless, that is the end of the video, ladies and gentlemen, and there is your answer and your extended historical reasoning. Yep, it's a lot of American, Japanese, and Soviet vehicles and tanks. Or really, just copies of them. Because that's what they had to do to survive, to fight back. They had to make what they could with what they have and what they were given. Alright, and that took a lot out of me. This is a video that I've been trying to get to for quite a while, and it feels good to finally get this off of my chest. I will see you guys next time for another War Thunder related video when I go over how they could implement World War I vehicles. Now, implementing the planes and the boats and other amphibious vehicles won't be too difficult. It's the tanks that I'm going to really be concerned about. Tanks and other armored land vehicles. As well as the fact that how that would work in main War Thunder given the more advanced shit. I mean, hell, World War I vehicles can't even compete against World War II vehicles. So really, the only way World War I vehicles could ever work in War Thunder is if either they make a complete spin-off or a separate mode just for World War I vehicles. Now, why do I say that? We'll save that topic for another video.